Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Movie Commentary Podcast. It's the podcast in which we'd watch movies and talk about movies. And today, first day is the first episode after our Halloween kind of month, so we're going to do a little something different. We're going to watch a movie from 1964, starring the Fab Four, also known as Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. I am, of course, referring to the legendary film A Hard Day's Night, which is also the namesake of I believe it was their third studio album that was released in the UK. And not a whole lot of other introduction. Again, I kind of want to do a bit of a shorter episode this week for various reasons, but also, again, I'm a big Beatles fan, and this is a movie that is kind of very near and dear to my heart. So, without further ado, let us go ahead and start the film. And the film starts off. You can hear it. You can kind of turn the movie down, but it's actually really funny because and I literally just saw it here. So the opening shot of the film here is a shot of the Beatles running away from their supposed fans. Apparently, the people in these opening scenes are actually fans, and you can actually see it in that opening shot there. While they're running down the street, the sidewalk there, George Harrison completely wipes out, and apparently he also rips his suit. And one thing that I did notice about it is there was like one of the lead people in people that was kind of leading the fans chasing them. He actually was kind of had to put his hands up and say stop, or else they were just gonna trample over them. So, and I just saw that in here, so that's pretty interesting. I think that scene, they originally were going to try and get rid of it, but it was obviously kind of a funny scene. It's actually kind of an iconic opening to the film. So, along with that amazing opening chord that George Harrison plays along with George Martin on the piano. I didn't know, of course I don't play guitar. I have a little bit of music background, but I mean that opening chord to A Hard Day's Night, one of the most legendary chords, has actually been studied for, what the actual, notes and, what the actual, fingers on, the guitar and what chords they would play and what chords on the piano they would play and how they would make that. I mean, there have been people that have done, like college dissertations over, what notes or what, chords were played in that opening chord to A Hard Day's Night. And, again, it's such a legendary way to kickstart it just bang, kind of to A Hard Day's Night. Starts the film off and really starts off the album too. So, and here's Paul McCartney with his fake goatee on. So, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, this film was conceived. Well, they decided to make this film honestly before the Beatlemania truly started to kick in, because I mean, what was it? I feel like so this film is produced by United Artists, who there was kind of a loophole role, or there was kind of some kind of rule that they could kind of exploit for a lot of money, in which they could actually produce a Beatles film and basically distribute the soundtrack to it. So so United Artists, basically the reason this film exists is because United Artists wanted to, cash in on some of the Beatles' success, and they didn't really even think the film itself was going to make a whole lot of money, but in fact it actually turned out to one of the most profitable films of all time. So we are now being introduced to Paul's grandfather, who's played by Wilfred, I believe, Bramble, who is a real actor. He's a real, I think he's a British actor. I'm not entirely sure, but he had been in several films before this, and he'd been. Let me find out the guy down here. Anyway, it's also really funny because watching this again, because I watched this scene so many times, I can quote this like, hello, grandfather, hello. You can talk then, can he? Of course he could talk. He's a human being, isn't he? I also try to pride myself on my Beatles accents that I can do. Yeah, Wilford Bramble. There we go. Irish actor from Ireland. And I'd probably say it's probably one of his most famous acting roles that he was in. Now we are also now being introduced to Shake, played by John Junkin, I believe, who was a British actor, and he's the fictional Beatles road manager. Now it's actually kind of interesting. The actual Beatles road manager, Shake here, he's kind of based on, I believe, he's kind of a mix between, I believe, Neil Aspinall and Mal Evans, kind of two guys that really were the Beatles road manager, probably the Beatles like road manager. And also John Junkin apparently talked to Mal Evans, the Beatles roadie, and basically the guy that would set up Mal Evans, the guy that would set up their equipment, at shows and kind of drive them around, and kind of also their bodyguard. Mal Evans did a lot of roles for the Beatles, but apparently John Junkin actually talked to Mal Evans, and he was trying to ask like, hey, what do you do actually, so I can kind of get your, get what you kind of get the role of the character and whatnot. And so the Shake character, John Junkin's character Shake, is kind of based on kind of a mix of Neil Aspinall and Mal Evans. So this is funny, just the funny scene. You get this old man that's kind of walking into the cart with the boys, and he's obviously one of like really stuck up kind of guy. So and another thing that I didn't say there, we were also introduced to the Beatles' other fictional manager named Norm, I do believe, played by Norman Rossington, who actually appeared on, and I do believe I may have, and I believe I may have mentioned this when I did this episode a few months ago. But Norman Rossington, who plays the Beatles' fictional manager, is actually Norman Rossington. He played a steward on the Titanic in the 1958 film A Night to Remember. Again, I covered that film probably back in August when I first started this podcast. So I would say, again, this is probably one of Norman Rossington's famous films. I don't know of any other films that he was in, but or a whole lot of other films that he was in, but this one and A Night to Remember, two films that I know a lot. So one of the things that's actually that A Hard Day's Night kind of does for the legacy of the Beatles is it kind of cements their stereotypes, because as you know, the Beatles themselves, all four of the Beatles, they kind of have like these like stereotypes of them. Like you kind of know how like Paul McCartney is kind of that Paul McCartney's kind of like the cheeky, cute one, and how John Lennon's a bit of a smart aleck kind of guy, kind of character, and then Ringo is kind of the gloomy, slapsticky kind of character, and then who was it? George Harrison. I can't remember. Again, he's kind of the quiet one. So, and the thing is, this film is really, for a lot of people back in the '60s, was their first, at least for a lot of people not in the UK and not in around Europe. This is a lot of their first introductions to the Beatles. As just people themselves. And for even a lot more people, even in the UK, it was their first introduction to them as people, because again, back in those days, you didn't have like the social media, you wouldn't get to know these guys online or any of that kind of thing. So So I'm pretty sure when people actually saw this film, they actually were thinking like, man, this is actually how they are, and this is actually how they function. This is how Paul McCartney is, and this is how George Harrison acts. This is how John Lennon acts, and Ringo Starr acts. So the thing that I think really also I think about this film is I think it actually does I think it does capture their personalities quite well, actually, because the screenwriter for this film, a guy by the name of Alan Owen, he actually wrote the screenplay kind of after following the boys around for a while, and he kind of wrote the script based on things that he thought that the boys would say. Of course, I'm pretty sure the Beatles actually did a lot of ad-libbing. They know they did a lot of ad-libbing in this film, based on all the things that they would say. So, I also feel I love some of these scenes. John Lennon has some of the funniest lines in any movie. He's like, have you seen Paul's Have you seen Paul's grandfather? He's like, of course, he's considered about me person. It's like, and then George, and then Ringo Starr's like, I can tell his grandfather doesn't like me. I think this film also, yeah, and then they're just on the train looking for Paul's grandfather now. It's actually really interesting because they're the Beatles themselves. They're not classically trained actors at all, and they're no actor experience at all. Shoot, they hardly had any professional music experience at all. I mean, they're kind of self-trained musicians, but they come in here and they basically and essentially play themselves, I think. And of course, I also said that they're kind of fictional versions of themselves, a little bit overblown. But I think also looking at real life interviews of them, it kind of matches actually. So, but what was I gonna say there? But they're given. But even though like they're not classically trained actors, and their performances at themselves as at least comedic wise is just really funny and really good actually. I mean, I feel like you get a lot of these musicians that like get in front of cameras. I mean, it's just kind of like cringeworthy to watch it because they're just, oh, this is not good at all. But I like watching these guys because they just, and one thing they even talk about a lot with real actors and actresses in films is, the chemistry between actors and actresses. And of course I don't think no four group of human beings in the world in history have ever had the chemistry that those four guys have had together. And of course they also do a real good job of kind of factoring in the obviously the Wilford Bramble, Norman Rossington and John Junkin's characters. So now they're playing cards, and now it's going to start playing into I Should Have Known Better, which they're going to actually kind of mime it. Actually, that's one of the things that they did a lot in this film is that they had they had the songs kind of in the background, and then when they filmed the scenes, they would actually have the Beatles kind of mime play the songs and all that kind of stuff. Even though John Lennon playing the harmonica there, and they're both they're all playing their songs. Of course, in the real version of I Should Have Known Better, John I think would have been playing his rhythm guitar, and it only shows him playing his harmonica here. And of course, Ringo's only playing the hi-hat and the snare, and not even the bass drum. So, that's the one thing. As we'll go into this movie, I mean the shooting of the music scenes has actually been very influential in kind of the development of the music video industry. And shoot, even the director of this film, Richard Lester, has been called the father of MTV for his basically for his work on this film, and how he shot like the Beatles like music scenes, and how it's like such how it was kind of groundbreaking at the time. So yeah. So yeah, now they're just playing the song, playing the as John Lennon would call the mouth organ. So it's actually kind of interesting here. There's a in the coming up here. Yep, no, right here. So there's Patty Boyd in this scene. Now, Patty Boyd, a lot of Beatles fans know as the first wife of George Harrison. In fact, they met on this movie. And while filming, I believe George Harrison actually asked her out to dinner. And at the time, Patty Boyd actually had a boyfriend actually, and so she was like, "I can't do it." And then George Harrison was like, I'm only asking you out to dinner," in his impression there. So they went out, and I think 18 months after the film was released, they actually got married. So. They also that Ringo's wearing all his famous rings. That's actually why Ringo is called Ringo, because he's got all those like rings that he's wearing on. He's always worn like all these rings, kind of on his fingers that he's been when he's playing drums. So. The interesting thing about all these police officers trying to hold all these fans back and all this kind of stuff is it honestly isn't that far removed from reality, because the Beatles. I mean, shoot, when by the time this film was released, I mean, Beatlemania was really in effect, especially in America, because I mean, this film was released a few months after their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, which really just exploded their exposure in America. And after this, I mean, they were explaining it was just absolute chaos. Every time that they were around, I mean, there were so many people around trying to get a look at them. Of course, sometimes I mean, it's always really interesting kind of hearing their perspective from it, especially Paul and Ringo nowadays, is how they were essentially living in kind of like their own little bubble per se of how they were so just surrounded by just in this bubble of fame and all that kind of stuff. So Window Rattler, it's actually really funny because they're talking about Ringo Starr snoring, and they're talking about how he's like snoring and whatnot, and it's always funny because Ringo's always made fun of for having a gigantic nose, which he does. So it's actually really interesting because again they're at a hotel, they're in a hotel room right now, and there's always, I remember one of the stories that they would always tell about their real life instances is that when they were on the road touring in the early 60s, the Beatles themselves, they were always they were always like really grateful for these moments kind of in their hotel rooms, because it was really their moments to really kind of unwind and get away from the public spotlight, because you gotta imagine, I mean, back in the day they were going to either playing shows, they were going to the studio recording, or they're making some kind of TV appearance or all that kind of stuff. So yeah. So yeah, no, it's kind of funny. Norm's making them answer all this fan mail that they got, and they just came in with like two just giant piles of fan mail for all the Beatles to respond to. So again, I'm pretty sure relatable to what actually happened in real life. What actually happened with the Beatles. So that's the thing. Like, I mean, for this film is like all fictional and is kind of on stage, but I do believe that in some kind of fashion it actually kind of mirrors what they actually experienced on a day-to-day basis in real life. That's really interesting. There's a butler that just came into their hotel room, and that man was also in the Night to Remember as well with Norman Rossington. So again, that's really interesting. Okay, so they're at a club now dancing, and Ringo is just dancing his full head off, and he is, Ringo is also very famous for being a Ringo is very famous for being a club dancer, and he was really famous for getting out and dancing a lot. So the song here is playing is "I Want to Be Your Man," which was released in their second album, I think with the Beatles, sung by Ringo Starr, but it was actually given to the Rolling Stones, and was actually the Rolling Stones' one of their first major hits, actually. Of course, a lot of people talk about the rivalry between they talk about the rivalry between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Of course, the Beatles gave the Rolling Stones a ton of songs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's always really fun. Okay, so now here's another song that they're playing. Now this is actually a really underrated song in the Beatles lore. This is "Don't Bother Me" by George Harrison. This is actually his first ever song that he wrote that appeared on a Beatles song, and this is one of my favorite. Beatles songs that was released. Actually, of course, George Harrison actually later kind of disowned the song. Of course, I mean, he went on to had a very prolific and accomplished songwriting career after this. I mean, even during his time with the Beatles, he probably wrote a lot better songs, but that was I was always a favorite of mine. "Don't Bother Me." So again, also on With the Beatles. So check it out if you haven't. Oh my gosh, I love. So Paul's grandfather, meanwhile, took Ringo's. Ringo had an invitation to like a gambling club or something like that, and Paul's grandfather essentially stole it, and he also stole this butler's like tux, and essentially went there and is gambling, and he basically like posed as a waiter and kind of stole these other guys like chips, and he used it to like gamble again. So again, Wilford Bramble really funny in this movie. He was pretty dang funny if you ask me. Of course, one of the things that they say is one of the things that they mention in this, they always mention is that Paul's grandfather is like he's a nice clean old man, isn't he? And I think that's actually kind of a reference because Wilford Bramble in an old song, in an old role that he did before the Beatles that he did before this movie is that he one of his characters was considered like a dirty old man or something like that, so they wanted to try and fix that up. It's like, he's a clean old man, isn't he? and then Norm comes and finds them, and they're going to basically to kick him out. And I always love how there's just no sound. You can't hear Norm in this song here. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Norm Rossington plays the part of the really stuffy manager really well, I believe. So I wonder. It's kind of weird. They changed their outfits. I don't know. Wonder what happened there. And there's like the old butler in the. There's an old butler in the cabinet. No, in the closet. Oh my goodness. So basically, like, the old man has just spilled the beans that Paul's grandfather has gone to the gambling club. So yeah, it's also really funny because it seems like they speak a lot of French at this like gambling club that they're at. However, like, that Paul's grandfather hasn't, doesn't know a lick of, French and all that kind of stuff. So have you had an old man here? I'm his grandma. And then they basically pull him out of the place. Easy come, easy go. Well, man, some classic scenes in this movie. No, so now the next morning John's in a tub and he's speaking in some speaking in some very broken German, which the Beatles would have known. I would say they should know a little bit of conversational German. The Beatles, their main break or their main kind of rise to fame actually kind of happened when they were playing kind of overseas in Hamburg, Germany, and and then obviously going all over Europe, during this time. So they've been around Europe quite a bit. So they know some of their European languages. It's always like really kind of just like a, I don't know, like, say, fly on the wall kind of, it's not really like, because there's not really a story going on here. It's just kind of like a day in the life of like a fictional day in the life of these kids and of the Beatles and that kind of thing. So, and he's so basically like shows like these really like just nonchalant, just like these kind of pointless scenes of like Ringo, of like George like putting like shaving cream on like a window, on like a mirror, and like shaving like shakes like fake beard, and essentially John disappearing into a bathtub. Which I've always wondered how he did that, or what the actual like explanation is. I love how John then comes and is like, "There's a car waiting. Come on." And then apparently the Beatles are going to um, like a television show or something they have to do. Which again, this is something that they would do a lot. The Beatles in the early days, while they in their early '60s, while the Beatles were in their so-called touring years, they actually they actually, according to them, their record deals during the early days really weren't that good. They didn't make a whole lot of money off of selling records or off of the albums that they made. They actually made most of their money in their live performances and their TV shows. So, of course, Ringo Starr in the early days basically said like, "Yeah, we had one of the crappiest record deals of all time." So yeah. I also love just like the comedy I feel like it's like this movie, like it's funny without like the super jokes. I mean, I feel like it's funny. So I mean, so they got like the scene right here. There's like this hors d'oeuvres tray passing around, and all four of the guys are trying to like pick something off of the plate there, and the plate kind of goes a little bit too fast, and they're not none of them are able to pick anything off. So. And this scene is also really funny because there's just literally just like them four in a room filled with like reporters and all that kind of stuff, and they're essentially just asking them all these questions and legendary responses. In fact, this scene right here, it's woman asked Ringo, "Are you a mod or a rocker?" And then actually apparently there was there was groups in the British called mods, and they were called mods or rockers, and of course Ringo obviously going straight down the middle. He's like, I'm a mocker, so. In fact, I think that's actually like one of the most famous, probably one of the more famous, film lines, from this movie. Actually, also the Beatles' haircut name, Arthur. He was like, "What do you call that hairstyle?" Arthur. Of course, George Harrison being pretty cheeky on all that kind of stuff. Of course, it's actually George Harrison is actually, I'd say George Harrison probably one of the funnier members of the Beatles. I mean, I feel like from what all I've heard about George Harrison, his sense of humor is, I think, more akin to mine, just personally speaking. In fact, actually, one of the first time that they ever met George Martin, who went on to produce essentially almost all their records, I'd say, except Let It Be, and then maybe a few others after that. But George Martin was, collaborated with them. George Martin collaborated with them, and really was the one that gave them their first record deal, and really got the ball rolling on their kind of rise to stardom. I mean, two guys that were really important in that. George Martin, their record producer, that signed them on I think to EMI Records, I think it was, or maybe it was Parlophone. I'm not really sure. It's all kinds of complicated stuff. Somebody else knows better than I do, but George Martin signed them onto the record deal that enabled them to start making start making singles, make a record, and then Brian Epstein, who really was the driving force behind, who basically Brian Epstein was running a record store, one of the largest. His family was running one of the largest record stores in Liverpool, I believe, and he discovered them at the Cavern Club one day, and he was like, I want to be a part of this band, and Brian Epstein was really the one that he kind of shaped their image. I mean, he really got them to start wearing, a lot of those famous scenes of those famous shots of the Beatles in, those old, when they're playing. I mean, they're wearing suits and nice looking suits and ties and like these boots. And originally they were wearing leather jackets and leather apparel, but Brian Epstein wanted to kind of have a bit more of a better portrayal per se, and then of course he was also the one that really got them to George Martin, and was trying to get them signed to all these record deals. So yeah. But anyway, going back to George Harrison, when they first played for George Harrison, I believe. For George Martin, actually, not George Harrison. So George Martin and George Harrison. This is going to get really confusing, but George Martin. So basically, the Beatles, the four guys, they kind of had played like a bit of an audition for George Martin to kind of see do you think they can make it and whatnot. And to be quite honest with you, George Martin wasn't too impressed with them at first. He wasn't really seeing it at first when he first met them. But one of the things that I think really broke the tension with them is I think George Martin came up to them and was like, "Well, is there anything that you don't like?" And then George Harrison, it was kind of a bit of a nervous bit in the conversation, but George Harrison went up to George Martin and was like, "Yes, I don't like your tie." And apparently I think the other Beatles were so terrified when he said that, and then it kind of broke the ice with them, and then shortly after that they signed on to the record deal, and the rest is history. So anyway, I've also I've been talking through their rendition of If I Fell in Love with You, which another great song in the album. I would say A Hard Day's Night, the album, which the UK album really is not the soundtrack edition in the United States. Of course, anytime that I talk about the Beatles albums, I go to the UK releases. I don't worry about the United States records, but A Hard Day's Night, the UK record, to me is one of their better records, I think, honestly. I mean, it's up there for me. Of course, my favorite record for the Beatles is actually is Rubber Soul, and I don't really know if I have a second favorite after this, but A Hard Day's Night is definitely up there for me. And of course, it's also really monumental because it's actually the first Beatles album with all Lennon-McCartney compositions. Of course, Lennon-McCartney, the very famous, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, songwriting duo. And, before, especially in the first two albums that they had made, Please Please Me and With the Beatles, I mean, they had a few, snippets of Lennon-McCartney songs. I mean, Love Me Do, Please Please Me, I Saw Her Standing There. I mean, all those, very famous Lennon-McCartney compositions, but, also, Twist and Shout, any other, like, there's other Boys that's sung by Ringo in that first album. I mean, they did a lot of covers in those first couple of albums, and and of course, Hard Day's Night, kind of a good step in the direction of them writing their own songs, because that was actually one of the things back in the days that was apparently was kind of revolutionary. Of course, now that we think about it, I mean, it's very, this is, commonplace nowadays, but, the Beatles were apparently one of the first bands ever to, they're the guys that, wrote their own songs, because apparently you would have, like, bands that would, when you would have bands record songs, they would go to, like, the studios, and then, like, the producers would, like, pick songs out for them to play, and then they would play those songs and all that kind of stuff. And the Beatles were one of the few, or the Beatles were one of the, they were one of the first ones to be like, hey, we have our own songs and we want to record these songs ourselves. So there's that. So I'd say probably the other famous song from this album, Can't Buy Me Love. We got the famous Can't Buy Me Love, the first famous Can't Buy Me Love kind of, like kind of montage in this film here. And it basically just kind of shows them, I think these are all helicopter shots, and they're basically just showing the Beatles just in a giant field, just kind of running around, just making fools of themselves, which is kind of funny, so. It was actually funny. John Lennon is actually not present in any of these scenes, especially these long scenes here, because he wasn't available. He was actually promoting his book, I believe it was John Lennon in his own right. It was like a song. It was like a compilation of, like, his own, like, poetry that he had written, and a lot of it was kind of like funny poetry and all that kind of stuff. But he went around, so he had a body double that was there for that. And you actually kind of see some of the close-up shots here. You only see Ringo, George, and Paul here. Of course, this looks like John here. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if that was actually John, but that looks like John there. So, of course, the hair also kind of looks good. So, of course, the camera's also really shaky because you really can't tell who's who here. So, and they have their famous, like, jumping in the air, like, like scenes there. So. Yeah. And yeah, another just also kind of another like famous scene of the Beatles. Kind of also just another famous scene of them because they were another famous scene, kind of in like the in the inspiration of like the music video because it's definitely got that like music video vibe when you watch that kind of montage of them just running around in the field and "Can't Buy Me Love" just kind of playing in the background. It definitely seems like this is a music video type that they were making or something like that. I don't know. So definitely in like in the modern sense of the word, if they made a music video for Hard Days, for "Can't Buy Me Love," and they did that, I thought it'd be pretty awesome. So it's actually really funny because there was a scene just now with it was Norman Rosington, John Junkin, however you say his name, I'm not sure. We also just saw Mal Evans just walk by. I just noticed that this John is looking with this woman, and I don't really understand this scene right here because this woman thinks that John looks like somebody, and like then at the end of the scene, she's like, you don't look like him at all. And then John gets kind of upset, and he's like, she looks more like them. She looks more like him than I do, that kind of thing. So, because I never understood this scene. Of course, I also just talked over this scene, so I didn't really, I didn't catch the dialogue in between them. Of course, I haven't seen this movie in like 2 years, maybe 2.5, maybe a year and a half, something like that. I haven't really sat down and watched it all the way through in a long time. So. Of course, you got George Harrison going to this office or something like that. Apparently he's got another scene that I'm not really sure the meaning behind this. Of course, George Harrison's going to like this like he accidentally stumbled into like this fashion designer's like this like fashion designer's like office, and apparently like the fashion designer's going to ask him about all these like clothes that they'd wear and all this kind of stuff, and George is like, we wouldn't be called dead wearing any of these, and so it's again, I think it's just another like just kind of funny scene for them to be funny scene for George or something like that. Of course, I always love this scene because like this, I don't know who plays this like fashion designer. He's definitely kind of like a European-ish style fashion designer, but but he like shows like George Harrison like all these like clothes that he's like designing, and George just like kind of poo-poos them and all this kind of stuff, and he really like and he kind of and he and the fashion designers like really just like taken aback by like his criticisms, like get him out of here, get him out of here. Although I do admit, I mean, those shirts look kind of nice. I don't know why George Harrison doesn't. I don't know why he doesn't like them. So I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be said dead in that. Of course, this guy doesn't know that he's talking to one of the Beatles, and whatever the Beatles basically wore in the '60s, was what everybody wanted to wear. So, of course, I mean that was one of the things I'm pretty sure like back in the days. I mean, people were going to all kinds of barbershops trying to get Beatles haircuts, or they were trying to like they were even like advertising like places where like you could buy like the Beatles style boots that you could wear and that kind of thing. So, so And then also George Harrison's now like talking about some like teenager that the that the like fashion designers talking about. She's a jack. Get him out of it. And I love how George Harrison's just so nonchalant about it. He just ruins this guy's day. I will admit, I mean, this movie is like one of the funniest movies, and it doesn't really even try to be. That's one of the keys of being, I think, a great comedy. You get a movie that is funny based on the characters, not based on any gags, not based on any jokes. You know, a movie that's funny based on just the characters. And, you know, they tell some jokes, and, you know, they have some funny lines, and there's some slapstick that happens, but, I mean, it's basically funny because, I mean, these four guys are, you know, just that funny. I mean, I think even in real life, you get the sense that they're just, you know, they're this funny, so. And again, I'll talk about it later, but one of my reasons that I think that the Beatles have, you know, kind of stuck around in our pop culture. I mean, shoot, even nowadays they're one of the most listened to, you know, bands in, you know, the history of the world. And I think one of the reasons is, you know, they touch so many demographics. I mean, you know, if you're a music fan, I mean, their music production is already legendary enough as it is. But then they're also, you know, if they wanted to be, they could be, you know, comedians as well. And, you know, you see here in this film here, I mean, they make, you know, they also make, you know, kick-ass actors as well. So I mean, and then, you know, also, you know, John Lennon, you know, did a little bit of writing, and I don't know, it was like they just were so like versatile and like their talents and all that kind of stuff. So, and you know, just like in the terms of pop culture, they were just so they just touched so many demographics that, you know, they were able to be like, I don't know, like become popular or something like that. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think you understand what I'm saying. Like they're a great they're great singers and songwriters. They're really funny, charismatic guys that were also pretty good in front of a camera as well. And then, you know, they could also, you know, write books, and, you know, they were just so, they could do all kinds of things. And, you know, obviously, I mean, versatility nowadays, you know, people that are good at a lot of things, you know, become really popular, you know, I can see, you know, people that are film fans that don't really give a lick about music that could become fans of them, or, you know, fans of comedy that can become fans of them literally by the alone of their interviews and alone of just watching this movie here without even listening to any of their music. You know, I can imagine how, you know, people would become fans of that. And that's like one of the reasons I've really kind of grown attached to them. You know, their sense of humor, I'm not gonna lie, it really matches my sense of humor, honestly. So it's kind of like that dry, cheeky sense of humor, really, that they like, that they're all that kind of stuff. So, all right. So now we're playing "And I Love Her," which I do admit it's in a different key than the album version. It's a bit of a different. I don't know. It's like a different octave or key or something like that. Of course, I'm pretty sure also if I was listening like with my uncle was really the one that really got me into the Beatles. I'm pretty sure he would be able to tell me, he's like, oh, it's in this key and this key in the album and then in this key in the film. So, and again, this scene right here, it's another example of the kind of the genesis idea of the music video, because a lot of these like they're doing a lot of like kind of like fade cuts and wipe cuts and all this kind of stuff to the, you know, and it really just, it evokes the sense of just, you know, the modern day music video. I mean, you look at the cuts and like the way that they're filming the scene of them playing "And I Love Her," and you see like, yeah, this looks like a music video and that kind of thing. So it's like, but back in the day, I mean, in a film, in a feature length film, I mean, this wasn't common. In fact, this was one of the first films that ever did this. So, I mean, it's just I wouldn't say I wouldn't. I mean, legendary maybe be a big word, but I mean, it was definitely um inspiring for leaving a lasting legacy for the rest of for all time or something like that. I don't know. What's actually interesting is, and I think I read this actually, and right before I watched this, but apparently Ringo is playing. So Ringo plays the bongos in this song. He doesn't play like the actual drums, and apparently he's playing the bongos the wrong way. Of course, also the famous lore of Ringo is that he's a left-handed drummer playing on a right-handed kit, and you can always see that he's kind of, I wouldn't say a little awkward playing on the right-handed kit, like, because of course the right-handed kit's kind of the standard kit nowadays for basically anybody playing, but apparently when he's playing the bongos, he's playing it kind of flipped, and apparently, like, I don't know, it's a little weird. So I don't know how to play the bongos, so I couldn't tell you. Of course, as a prospective drummer myself, I've also stated how I've always really appreciated and always thought how awesome it was for Ringo to be a left-handed drummer, basically playing on a right-handed kit, because you got to imagine. I mean, it's basically all backwards for you. I mean, of course, Ringo was also taught to be right-handed at an early age because I think it was his grandmother was one of those, like, left-handedness is the sign of the devil kind of people. So, but of course, also, like, by just, like, so he could play right-handed and he learned how to be right-handed. But, like, when it came to, like, just, like, natural, like, feel of a drum, he couldn't really do it because, like, he always had to lead with his left hand because he was just biologically inclined to be left-handed. So he could basically keep he could keep a beat on the right-handed kit, but when he did like a fill, I mean, it was always kind of wonky because he would lead with his left hand. And when you lead with your left hand on a right-handed drum kit, I can tell you it's really awkward because I've always tried to lead with my I've always tried to lead with my left hand on the right-handed kit while trying to do a fill, and it's really awkward when you're trying to do the fill when you're not left-handed, but it's also really awkward because you kind of have to go, like, you have to bring, like, the hand under it, and, Ringo talks about this all the time, but it also really adds to like, his, sound, all that kind of stuff, so. I think that's one of the things about the Beatles, honestly, is that, I think that's one of the things about the Beatles, really, is that it's a great example of how the sum is greater than how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, actually. Because if you take the Beatles by themselves, I mean, you get, John Lennon's a really good, guitarist, rhythm guitarist. Paul McCartney's, one of the most versatile musicians of all time. I mean, one of the greatest singers, songwriters of our, of our time, great, he plays the piano, plays the drums, plays the bass, plays the guitar. I mean, he's basically a one-man band on his own. George Harrison, legendary, guitar player, legendary songwriter in his own right. And then Ringo Starr, a lot of people would say, not the greatest drummer or not the greatest drummer in the world, but, he, keeps a great beat and is really, reliable drummer, so. And, but when you get them together, there's just something there that just, there's just something there that, you just can't replicate easily. I mean, again, I think it's also their chemistry and, the brotherhood of, that they had together and, the fact that they really liked playing music with each other, so. I mean, it's really a perfect storm of, it's like a cosmic perfect storm in my eyes, honestly, but I don't know. I mean, I think if you really, I mean, also, like, one of the things, like, about the whole, like, the sum is greater than the whole, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts of the Beatles, is that I feel like if you put the Beatles, say if you compared the Beatles with a band like Led Zeppelin, um, I would say, I mean, if you compared like each of the components of Led Zeppelin to the Beatles, I would say a lot of people like, yeah, Jimmy Page is probably like is a bit more of a technical, better guitarist than George Harrison. Of course, other people would completely disagree with me on this, or John Bonham is technically a much better drummer than Ringo Starr, and Robert Plant can sing much higher and more range than Paul McCartney can, and John Paul Jones also can really groovy bass lyrics, but and again, Led Zeppelin, they were again legendary band on their own right, and they were another band that's amazing, but just didn't really resonate with everybody like the Beatles can, because I feel like with the Beatles there's something with every song, with like everything that they did, there's like a little something for everybody, so I don't know. And they also just played I'm happy just to dance with you. Ringo, Lennon McCartney composition sung by George Harrison, which I think that song, and then George sings another song on A Hard Day's Night. Yeah, George sings another song on A Hard Day's Night. I wonder which one he does, because I know that he does. I'm happy just to dance with you. That's the only one that he sings. Shoot, this is very much a heavy McCartney Lennon, Lennon McCartney album. So now we have the scene here, and then another bit of comedy here. I don't know why this guy, he just took like a bottle of ketchup and like put it on his sling. We're in this like restaurant right now, and Ringo's reading a book, and he's kind of watching after Paul's grandfather. And he's kind of telling Ringo, like, you gotta stand up for yourself, because you're the drummer, and you're getting treated like a bit of sham, or whatever British thing that he's saying. And Ringo's trying to like go out and do his own thing or something like that. No, he says he's like going to like do his own parade or something like that. I don't know. Again, it kind of goes into that fact that Ringo's. I think it's just he's trying to play into the fact that Ringo's a bit of an underrated member of the group, which I think history puts Ringo. I think ultimately history finally kind of accepts the Beatles as a whole instead of like just the individuals, because I will admit, the Beatles, without one, if there was one of the four members that weren't in the Beatles, then the Beatles just aren't the Beatles. Let's just be quite honest with that. If Ringo wasn't the drummer, they weren't the Beatles. If John Lennon wasn't, part of that, if John Lennon wasn't a part of that songwriting duo, there wasn't going to be any Beatles. If George Harrison wasn't the lead guitarist, there aren't any Beatles. And again, they were a cosmic. I get kind of like big, very philosophical, and I know like my astrology friends would get a little bit excited about this, even though I know nothing about that. But lightning in a bottle, once in like a 10 generational, not even once in a generational, but like once in like 100 generational, like aptitude for musical talent, for music. I don't know, but it's something that just never happens. It happens once and then it almost never happens again. Something of how good these guys were, and like the storm that they created and the lasting impact that they had on pop culture. So now Ringo is leaving the. Ringo is now leaving the Ringo's walking out on them, and he's essentially, I think what he said, he's going to go parade around and do his own thing, and he's basically taking like a camera and he's going out to like just take pictures and all that kind of stuff. So, which I don't know how they. So the other three are going out to look for him, but I don't know how they can find him because he literally just walked out the door. He just walked out the door and they don't see him. That's kind of stupid. Now, this is actually really interesting. This is an instrumental version of This Boy, again, another song by the Beatles, that they, another song that they were famous for, like This Boy, and they always kind of called it like, Ringo's theme, because, I mean, it's really famous, for this scene right here. Of course, this is a very famous scene for, this is a really famous scene for Ringo because, he was actually quite lauded for his acting in this scene. Of course, Ringo is always kind of known for being the more theatrical one, and the one that was he was actually the one after the Beatles even broke up. He was very much the one that wanted to become an actor and wanted to act in his own films and do that. So, of course, the interesting thing about this scene, that when he was shooting this scene, is that he was actually hungover. So a lot of this was done. I think he was either hungover or even partially drunk. So there was of course, a lot of this, like him moving around, is just him recovering from being hungover and drunk. So yeah. I believe this is like towards the end of production when they were filming these scenes here. And then he trips on a tire. I'm pretty sure that he was actually drunk because he literally just like tripped over a tire. Or unless he actually did that purposefully. Actually, it was really it was actually kind of interesting, like Ringo holding that camera, because I mean the Beatles, when they were, in the middle of their Beatlemania, they were actually in the basically there was a hurricane of Beatlemania and they were really in the eye of it. They actually took a lot of pictures, of themselves. They took a lot of pictures of kind of their surroundings, of what was going on. And, Ringo actually has this like really famous picture of like where where like a car of like teenager fans kind of rolled up beside them, and he took a picture of them. And apparently the people reunited like 50 years after that, and like took a picture, like basically recreated that picture, which was, again, really, really interesting. But no, I mean they took a lot of pictures while they were on the road, and while they were and while they were obviously going through all the Beatlemania stuff. So. And now, now the world is coming to an end because Ringo is now missing because they're not at the studio for the final run through. So it's like, oh no. When Ringo is like eating like some kind of sandwich there. So now Ringo is apparently paying for a sandwich and a beer. And his beer just crashed. Yeah, he's just like, again, here's that more of like that slapstick coming in because, Ringo's, it's more of the Ringo because, he's obviously kind of more of the, he's always been kind of more of the clown of the group because, of his like slapstick kind of deal, that kind of thing, so. Oh dear, he almost just hit that bird. And you always see that there's like a policeman like following Ringo. Like there's like, how are they getting like all that? I feel like I've seen that policeman in a movie before. I'm not sure though. It's actually really interesting because you see, I've mentioned in other shows before and in that, and I haven't mentioned it before in this film, but I just now notice it with Norm Rossington smoking that when this film was released in America, there was actually a bit of an uproar over there was actually kind of an uproar in America for seeing these guys basically smoking. Apparently, even Elvis Presley was actually kind of, taken aback by seeing these guys, basically smoking and on screen and whatnot. Of course, I feel like, smoking back in the 60s on screen, maybe not in America, but I feel like, it would have been a little bit more, common in films. Of course, nowadays, I feel like you never would see, people smoking real cigarettes. I'm pretty sure if they were actually shown to be smoking in a film, I'm pretty sure they'd be using like, fake cigarettes or that kind of thing. So, yeah, no, it was I wouldn't say controversy when they showed the smoking in the film, but it was something that I don't think American fans were really ready for or something like that. And another interesting thing about this movie is that the Beatles... Oh, and here's Ringo doing his... Oh my goodness, so he found like this like he found this woman that he's like doing the whole like stupid like put the coat down and have the woman walk over it kind of shtick, and then like he puts one thing down and then this woman actually like falls into the hole. And then Ringo gets apprehended by the police for some reason. I don't know why, but... And again, I feel like I've seen the policeman that just apprehended him somewhere before, but I don't know where. But that's just me, so... And then same with this police sergeant. Of course, I feel like they all look the same to me in movies, so... And then what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so another interesting, before I got interrupted by that really funny scene there, but so when they finally made this movie, one of the things that United Artists was wanting the filmmakers to do was they actually wanted the film to be dubbed in more Americanized, like English voices, because people were kind of worried that they wouldn't be able to understand the Liverpudlian accent of the Beatles and that kind of stuff. And then John Lennon Paul McCartney actually apparently got pretty upset when he heard that was actually going to be happening. I think one of the quote was, if we have to listen to and I'm going to paraphrase here, kind of clean up the language, if we have to listen to a dang Texan, freaking American, then they can listen to our effing Liverpool accents and blah, blah, blah. So and apparently they got pretty upset about that. It's also kind of one of the things that I noticed with the, when they make the, like, Swamp Hunters, shows of, like, people that live down in like Louisiana, and they kind of hunt those crocodiles, and you have to like put like subtitles to understand like the Cajun. Of course, people that live down there, and I have a lot of family that lives down in the South. They had a lot of they understand it even without the subtitles, so it's kind of funny. They could have added the subtitles in this film, but obviously they didn't. So. And then apparently Paul's grandfather is like saying that the police is out to get him, and they're like some kind of assassins or something like that. I also think this is one of the first like instances of like people like drawing like mustaches and glasses like on a TV screen, because George Harrison just did that on that screen there. So, of course, also Wilford Bramble and Paul McCartney's supposed grandfather is also really is apparently like he runs like an old man. So. Gotta love it. He's like paying these kids to like just. He's like paying these kids to distract a police officer. And he's trying to like go get. Kind of funny. It's like a little bit of a Blues Brother like chase, like the police are chasing after them. Now they're gonna start the final quote unquote chase in the film. They're gonna go to the police. The three guys go to the police station and bust Ringo out. And yet another rendition of "Can't Buy Me Love" appears on the screens, appears in the background. So. You also love it because like it's kind of funny because like the three Beatles go into the police station. Basically, apparently they distract the police officers, and then they start running out, and the police officers go chasing after them. And then Ringo, after that, kind of saunters out and starts chasing by them. So it's really interesting. Like half this movie is basically like the four lads getting like chased by various people. So. And it's really funny because, like, while they're chasing him, like, back and forth, like, the police are, like, running by this guy that's trying to like, carjack, like, this parked car or something like that. So, yeah, it's always kind of funny like that. I feel like this scene also, like, in a part way kind of inspires the Blues Brothers, because it's basically like a huge giant police chase, and then like it just keeps like growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and all that kind of stuff. So, and I also love how like John like kind of sneaks behind the police officers in that scene there. So again, just kind of adds to like the slapstick nature of the chase and all that kind of stuff. And then that carjacker like breaks into that car, and then one of the police officers like tells him, "Hey, go chase after those guys." Although I will admit, I don't think that they would be allowed to be playing if the police were actively after them, but yeah, of course it also was a film, so. Now this TV director, I think he's played by Victor Spinetti, or he's played by some British actor, but I don't really know, but he definitely gives a pretty solid performance here. So. Great acting scene by John Lennon here. He's basically like kind of talking to his like, yeah, you should have gone west to America. Instead, you stayed in. Instead, you took a wrong turn. Now look at you, you're a lonely old man from Liverpool. And I love that. I love it. It's a really well acted scene by John Lennon. Again, that for as inexperienced as these guys are in acting, they're actually really good actors. In fact, it's actually kind of an interesting story because they had to. Because there was an actors union in the United Kingdom that apparently you had to be a part of in order to, be act in a film, and apparently they had to literally be initiated like on the first day of shooting, and they apparently had to be helped by like Wilford Bramble and Norman Rossington. So now we have the famous final, TV kind of apparently the supposed TV appearance of them playing their songs. Now, this final like concert is actually really, it's really, again, really famous for how it's like how it's edited together, looking like a music video, and it kind of inspires like our modern interpretation of music videos is what I've been talking about all through the film. But also one thing that Dick Lester and the filmmakers did while they were making this was that they use multiple cameras to shoot this. I mean, there's lots of cameras, at work here. And I think it was like either 5 or 6 cameras that were, capturing this. And one of the funnier stories actually, while with one of the cameramen that was actually like in the crowd with like all the screaming like young people and whatnot, is that they were apparently I think they took about like 3 or so days to like film this, but apparently some of them like there were filmmakers that were in the crowd with like all the young girls like screaming their heads off and that kind of thing, and after about a couple days of shooting that, the cameramen were like complaining of like teeth ache, complaining of like aches in their mouth because like all of the vibration and all of like the screaming had like caused like some people's like teeth to start cracking. And I kid you not on that. I mean, that's how like loud some of these like loud and like vibracious some of these like young kids were like yelling at the Beatles. So of course I don't think this is actually they were actually like playing this. I think it was again they were miming it. They may have been like playing like they may have done like some kind of like mock concert, but I feel like again those are real fans like in the audience there, and I'm pretty sure that's also like real fans like screaming. So actually really interesting. There was a cut scene there was a cut musical number. I think it was either I'll Cry Instead or Anytime at All, I think. One of those two was supposed to be in this film, and it was actually going to be really interesting because Phil Collins, the drummer for the band Genesis, and then also famous for his like "In the Air Tonight" song, apparently he was supposed to be shown in the audience as just one of the audience members. So, and of course Phil Collins is I think he has cited, Ringo as, an inspiration to his drumming, so that kind of thing. You can definitely notice the effect of the shaky cam, the effect of the shaky cam in this film, because there's so much like handheld, like shaky, like film that's been used in this film, so. And this is also, this is about like, about 10 or so years before before Garrett Brown invented the Steadicam. So I mean, nobody, they wouldn't have, been able to have those like smoother, like shots that the Steadicam would have been able to make. of course, also the shaky cam kind of also adds to the it adds to the the documentary-ish style of the film here. So, and then even this shot right here, at the end here, it's shot just like the Beatles music videos that they made in the '60s. It's so similar to the stuff that they made back then. So. All right, so yeah, and they're playing. I should have known better again. Again, probably down an octave, or half octave, or something like that. I never understood why they did this in the film, why they why they played it down an octave in the different than the studio album version. I don't know. So they also show that Ringo's got his famous Black Oyster Pearl Ludwig drums, probably the most famous drum set in the history of rock and roll, to be quite honest with you. You also got George Harrison's 12-string, I think it's his 12-string Rickenbacker, I think it was, and which of course George uses ostensively as as the lead guitarist. So even towards the kind of the end here, they even said George Harrison playing guitar for the Beatles was he even when he started with the Beatles, because he was one of the youngest members he was very young when he met the Beatles. John Lennon, when he first met George Harrison, thought he was too young to be in the band, and right away John Lennon, Paul McCartney realized how talented George Harrison was, and how talented they were, and how he could be how George Harrison would be a great lead guitarist for them. In fact, apparently the way that George Harrison was able to get onto playing for them is that they actually ended up on the top deck of a double-decker bus, and there was a song called Raunchy that apparently George Harrison could just play immaculately, and Paul essentially said to George, hey, get your guitar out and play Raunchy. So he got it out and he played it, and apparently John Lennon was just so impressed by it that he invited him into the band, and the rest was history, and that's how that happened. And then obviously, no Beatles performance in the early '60s would be incomplete without playing "She Loves You," which is, I'd say I'd say "She Loves You" and "I Want to Hold Your Hand." I'd say probably the two songs that most epitomize the Beatlemania of the early to mid '60s, because they would play those songs at almost every single show that they played at. So it was I'm pretty sure for them it'd be getting annoying. I know that one of the things that they said, as they kind of went along, as they went along in the '60s, they as they grew, because you got to imagine, these guys started this band they started this, group. They started this band, a lot of them when they were really, really early 20s, and even for George Harrison, he started when he was in his late teens. So these guys are honestly basically kids when they were starting this band out, and then obviously as the '60s went along, you grow up. As they grew up, they matured. As obviously the '60s was also the the counterculture era and that kind of thing. So, and as they grew up, their music tastes, they matured with them, and they went away from being these four young mop tops that wanted to play "She Loves You" all the time, and to playing more grown up songs in Rubber Soul and Revolver, to doing like really experimental stuff, like in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band to the White Album to even White Abbey Road to their final stuff. So, so yeah, they were. So yeah, again, the Beatles. I mean, always maturing, always changing in the '60s. I mean, that's the one thing that's always one of the things that's great about them is that they weren't a one-trick pony. I mean, they could do all kinds of different things, and that's maybe what I was trying to say earlier with how they're so versatile and kind of how they were and they could do all kinds of different things. And again, they weren't a one-trick pony. I mean, some of their earlier albums were very much like some of their earlier albums were very much like Beatles were very much just them playing like pop rock songs for the fans and all that kind of stuff. So, but then as they went along, I mean, they went into more like serious. They went into like more serious stuff, like Rubber Soul's a lot of like very deep, introspective, kind of music for them to play, and then Revolver, you started getting to like a more like experimental music, like Tomorrow Never Knows and. What's another one there? Tomorrow Never Knows is probably the best part of that. But again, more serious stuff, not just like She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, pop rock songs kind of thing. So, so yeah. And so we're going through the credits here, and again, this is a great credit scene here because it's it's pictures from the photo shoot of the that they use for the album, because the album is actually like just a whole bunch of, the album cover is a whole bunch of pictures, about four pictures of John, 4 pictures of Ringo, 4 pictures of George, and 4 pictures of of Paul. And that's what I was trying to say. And I always really loved like just kind of these shots here and how they kind of end the film, and it's just a really nice just nice bookend to the film. So, and then you also kind of end with the Hard Day's Night. So, and I also really love how the credits kind of end here, and the arpeggio that they play at the end there, because it ends on right here on, I believe that's John Lennon's, the back of his head, and there's a the end kind of that he's kind of facing the camera there. So, and so that's that. So that is the first of the Beatles theatrical films that they released. Now, the Beatles, while they were still the Beatles, they were involved in 4 more films after this. They made, about a year after this film, they made, because they actually, when they started this film, they actually signed a 3-picture deal with United Artists, and this is the first picture of that 3-picture deal. They made this film, then they made Help the next year later, which I will admit, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Help as a film. I mean, I think it works fine, but I think if you're really a fan of this film, I think you're just stick with this film. I mean, if you're a fan of the Beatles, I'd say watch Help, but this film kind of sets the bar pretty high and kind of makes Help at least for me, a bit of a tough watch. And then after Help, I think 2 years after Help, in '67, they made a TV film called Magical Mystery Tour, which turned into an album, the Magical Mystery Tour, which to me is, I'd say, one of the most underrated albums that they've ever made. I mean, I'd say it's probably it's an outlier of Beatles albums, even though, like, even as they were getting into the more experimental, later experimental kind of out there kind of music in the later stages of their era in the '60s. I mean, that one I still even is very weird for their liking, but it also has a lot of really good songs in it as well. And then there also was and then in 1960, I believe this was made in '68 or '69, one of those 2 years, they released an animated film called Yellow Submarine, based on the song by Ringo Starr, called Yellow Submarine, and it was an animated film. None of the Beatles actually voiced their animated counterparts. They actually had voice actors coming in and voicing them, which actually that apparently was according to Paul, at least, that was kind of, or I think it was actually George said this in an interview. He actually said that was kind of the impetus for the Beatles, these really cartoonish accents, because that's how George Harrison talks like that. I try and take his accent from what I see in the film here, and then also talk like, I think you talk like John. He's talk a bit more snarky and a bit more grown up, but he's still a bit of a nice guy. And then Paul's like this, he's a bit more of a cheeky guy, that kind of stuff. And then Ringo, is a bit more of a deeper voice and get it in the nose, and that kind of thing too. And I'll just play the drums all day with my big nose. Oh my goodness. So the Beatles, the only involvement the Beatles had in Yellow Submarine was they filmed a really short, like, kind of cameo at the end of the film after basically the film was over. They filmed like a really short cameo with all of them. And then in 1970 in the 1969 they made a film. I think it was with David Warner Hogg, and they called it, and it was basically filmed during what was called the Get Back sessions, which would later become the final album release for the Beatles, called Let It Be. And Let It Be basically became like this like fly on the wall like documentary that basically showcased the Beatles, recording together and recording the Let It Be album together. However, it was very controversial back in the day, and actually even nowadays it's still the Let It Be that final Let It Be film does not have an official home media release. Now I actually bought like a bootleg copy from eBay, but there's not like an official like Beatles release, like the Beatles like endorsed. There's not like an official like Blu-ray of the film, and it's mainly because like the film kind of showcases basically the breakup of the Beatles. Like it basically showcases what's going to lead up to the breakup of the Beatles, and it shows a lot of arguing and a lot of just like kind of tension in the group while they're recording the songs. So it's a little, and that's why like even some of the Beatles, like even Paul and Ringo nowadays, are a little hesitant to show it. Even though now I'm pretty sure a lot of you know Peter Jackson from Lord of the Rings fame and from the director of the King Kong remake in 2005. He's basically gonna take a lot of that film that David Warner Hogg filmed for the Let It Be film, and he's going to basically re-edit it into a new version called, and he's basically going to call it the Beatles Get Back, and and according to them, it's actually going to be a bit more of a positive version of the Let It Be film. It's going to be a lot more of the positive interactions between the Beatles, and hey, it wasn't all like, and they're going to try and show us like, hey, it wasn't all like, doom and gloom and, argument while making Let It Be. But yeah, so they want to show that they actually had like some good times while filming Let It Be. So, but yeah, no, so that's A Hard Day's Night, and again, it's it's regarded as a classic, especially for like for music, like movies and all that kind of stuff. Like I can definitely see how like some like modern day music, like a movie like called like like the famous movie like This Is Spinal Tap. I feel like This Is Spinal Tap, which I think is probably the best example of like like those music kind of documentary-ish comedy style films. I don't think that those would be around without A Hard Day's Night or without the Beatles' work here. So, and again, This Is Spinal Tap is again a legendary film. So we can have the Beatles to thank for that in A Hard Day's Night, and then again, you also heard me talk about in the film here how they basically were the of they basically they're the inspiration for like MTV and all that kind of stuff. So and I'm even reading here. I'm even reading here. I have like this little booklet here that I'm reading. Apparently, someone even calls this film the Citizen Kane of jukebox movies, which I've never really understood that kind of thinking, but it is kind of like jukebox movies. I've never really understood. I don't know if is that really a genre of jukebox movies? Again, I'm not really sure. So. But again, I mean, the thing that should be stated, kind of all in all, because I know there's been a lot of just talk about, there's a lot of topics that's been covered here. I mean, from a filmmaking standpoint, talking about the movie here, A Hard Day's Night was really a landmark in the evolution of film, of a music film, of music in film. The idea of music videos, and MTV was took a lot of beats from this film right here. I mean, and even like later, like kind of like fly on the wall, like documentaries that bands would make, or kind of like comedies that they would make, took a lot of cues from this film. And even like later comedies, I'm pretty sure took a film, because I mean, I would say this is one of the funniest movies ever made, and it's really on the basis of just the Beatles being themselves in this film. So yeah, I mean, again, it's just not only were the Beatles trendsetters in their songwriting abilities, they also were not themselves. I mean, they were actors in this film, but I mean the people that were making this film, they were a part of a film that was a trendsetter in the media of music and film. So yeah, that's what I got to say on that. And do I have anything else to say on A Hard Day's Night? I don't think I do, actually. Again, just a nice little like kind of just weird, flat out comedy that there are times in the movie that I obviously knew that I didn't really have a whole lot to talk about, which it's going to happen, but again, I always love talking about the Beatles, and they're one again. I think not without a doubt the greatest band that has ever lived and will probably ever live. So, and I will go to my grave thinking that. So that's all I'm going to say on that, y'all. To be quite honest with you, I don't really know what's going to happen next. What movies I'm going to be doing next. I have a lot of requests that I've been kind of holding off for a while that I really need to start working on, and I got my buddy Cody who's wanted to look on the watch out in the next couple weeks for another podcast with me and Cody again. Check out our Star Wars podcast that was released about a month and a half ago, and then he might be we might be recording another episode together. So keep an eye out for that. And again, if you got any again, follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, we're both at the Movie Commentary Podcast, just all one word, all undercase letters. Again, if you got any movie requests, send it into Instagram or Facebook, or my email or even my email, the Movie Commentary Podcast at yahoo.com. Thank y'all for listening to the podcast. I'm watching on YouTube, and that's where I'm going to leave it off at. Thank y'all for listening. Stay golden out there, and I will see you on the flip side.